Welcome to the show, IB Nation Sports Talk, up and running. I'm on a different computer than I am usually on today because the computer that I am usually on is decided it didn't want to work right when it was time to start the show. So glad to have you with us here today. Glad to be back. I was off yesterday. It seems like I've been off for a week after being off yesterday, but we've got a full house today, and I'm looking forward to this one because usually it's either Jesse and me or Vince and me. And since we didn't have a show yesterday, we're all three here together today. So here we
Full
are.
house. Full house, baby. Let's do this thing.
Some would say the real dream team.
Some would say. Some would say.
Just saying.
We've got all kinds of stuff that we're going to get to in today's show, starting with the main topic that we've got, Notre Dame and Clemson. It's like, it doesn't seem like it's been almost 2 years since they played, does it?
No, it does not seem like it's been that long. And I was giving Brian a hard time about this during the post-game show. I didn't get to see that one live because every entity at the time was only allowed one person in the press box.
That's right.
And I got outvoted by the boss. we were a team of two at the time. It was him and me, and I got to watch it from home. So I'm kind of excited about this one. I get to see Clemson in person for the first time ever.
I guess I will too, now that you mention it, because I was not at that game because I was still at the radio station. And
that's right.
Because of, the limitations that you were talking about, we did the pregame show and the postgame show and all that. And I don't think they had accommodations for us at that because
they did not for broadcasting, right? Like you could have gone to the game, but you broadcast right up to the start of it, and then you start right when it's over. So there's no point in going to the game because you would have been there for half of it in the middle, which would have made no sense.
Right.
So yeah. Exactly.
Jess, you look a little bit tired. It's like you went to a Monday night football game last night or something.
I'm beat today.
You look like Jack Daniels beat you up last night is what you look like.
No, so we went to the game last night, and then I had to get to the airport early this morning at 6 a.m. And then I had to run to traffic violation court, and then I got a flat tire on the way home. So it's just been a very splendid day.
Those are all good times. You did go to the game last night though, right?
Yeah, I did go to the game last night too. So yeah, it's just been game, up early for flight, working, traffic court, flat tire. Now I'm here. Got a chili cook-off for work tomorrow that I'm not prepared for. So
get out all the herbs and special seasonings tonight to make that pot of chili.
Yeah, I need to go to the chili. I need to go to the store after this and get all my ingredients. And I've never made chili before. I've never made this recipe before. So
just go buy chili.
Yeah, we'll just see how it goes. But yeah, it's just been the longest day, and it just seems to just get worse and worse. But today right now is the bright side. There's nothing else going on right now. We're going to talk about how Notre Dame is going to beat Clemson, and then I'll go get my ingredients to make chili.
See, you got to carry in tomorrow. I've got to carry in tomorrow. The difference is I signed up for drinks. So
that's so Vince. That is so Vince, man. Y'all bring a packet of Kool-Aid, guys.
You provide the water and the container. Does
anybody have a 64-ounce pitcher I can put this in?
That's right. I signed up for drinks. So there we go.
Vince is handing out Kool-Aid for Halloween last night. All right. Well, is this working? Okay, here we go. It's again, one computer's working, one's not. The title of this show is Notre Dame Ready for Clemson, of course. That's what we're going to discuss today. BVG should be coached brings up a good point. Are we ready for Clemson? Yes. Are we ready to face Clemson and the horrid ACC refs? No. The state of officiating this year, there is a shortage of high school officials that the whole nation has been dealing with the last few years. And it's apparently officials just stop the flow of officials stopped somewhere along the line because college officiating has just been brutal this year as well.
I think it's an epidemic from little league and middle school sports all the way to the professional ranks. The officiating, whether it is a lack of officials, whether it is a lack of good officials, or whether it's just a lack of common sense. I'm not sure. Maybe it's a little bit of all of the above, but officials have been a problem across the board, and absolutely across the board in everything that I deal with or, participate in my entire athletic life right now. And it's really pathetic is what it is.
Yeah, it's just unfortunate you get a lot of people who don't know the rules, thinking they know the rules, and then they're trying to kind of like, force explain their flawed logic to everyone else. And it's like, I know that this is wrong. I got not into it, but I coached a baseball team over the summer, and you got all these people trying to tell you what the rules are, and it's like, I don't have my credentials posted, but I've been playing baseball for a long time, people. Like, we don't have to be explaining the rules like I'm a child. I know what the rules are, and that's the most frustrating part. Is it seems like you get explained to like a child, but then they're wrong at the same time too. So that's the most frustrating part, in my opinion. It's worse the higher you go up, right? Because then there's more on the line. There's more things on the line. Obviously, with sports betting, there's more on the line, and you just don't want to see the bad calls.
Yeah, and as Tommy Gunn says, refs got to be tired of dealing with the millennial parents who got participation trophies. So ask the good ones left, and he said, "P.S. He's a millennial parent," and it's it's. I think it's very true. There's a whole lot of layers to it, but like the one thing I'll say in defense, like it being a referee is not an occupation that I would have ever chosen. Like it's like when you go to little league games and you've got little league parents who want to beat up the ref because of a bad call. It's one thing to chirp a little bit and whatever. It's like I do think that some of the good officials or good, bad, whatever in the middle have left, and the ones who are good do move up the ladder, and good for them. But when you've got a shortage where you are right now, there's just a lack of good officiating across the board, I think, with the exception of the pro ranks. Professionally, do they miss some calls? Yeah, but they're much more consistent across the board at the professional level than they are at any other level.
And somebody, mentioned pay and
that's part of it too.
If you throw in the equation of pay versus grief that you receive, obviously anything below professional level is way different. And, if you want to be a high school umpire, referee, official, whatever, you're going to get a heck of a lot of grief for not that much pay. And it's not, I will say that it is not worth it. I will also say I had thought about being a referee at one point. It just never really kind of worked out. But I would enjoy it. I would actually enjoy being a referee. But in certain sports, not so much. Like basketball, where they're right on top of you and they can yell at you and, curse your children and all that stuff.
That was the most fun as a student. You could say whatever to the players and the referees. You could let them know when they're doing a bad job.
I remember you in the front row of the student section, Jesse, and I know that you used to give a hard time to the Stripes. So
you got to let them know.
The best sport to do, I think, is an official because you're farthest away. It's not like you're a home plate umpire or a first base umpire, and you got people right there, like you were saying with basketball or any of these other sports. It's like football, you can screw up, but you're away from everybody. So they might yell at you, but you really don't hear them.
Absolutely. Football ref, I think it would be fun to be a football official. I really do think that would be fun. I think we, the three of us, if we all lived in the same place, we could be football referees. That'd be fun.
Yeah, we could be a crew. That's right.
We could be a crew, and I guarantee we'd get jobs immediately because of the lack of good officials around here.
You're right. You're right. And it actually, from a pay standpoint, like probably pays better than what I'm making for doing games on the radio for that matter. And you get a little bit of exercise at least.
I'm just saying. Right? Just saying.
All right. Well, let's talk about the subject at hand. We've got a lot to cover today because you and Vince, you and Brian have the college football playoff selection show coming up later. What time is that actually going to originate tonight?
8:00.
8:00?
8:00 because the show, I believe the actual show this week is at 7. So we'll let the show kind of play out. We'll be able to kind of jot down our ideas, and then we're going to go live at 8 o'clock. I know it's going to be me and Brian for sure. The other Sean and Ryan may or may not join, but it will at least be Brian and myself.
All right. Well, so what we're talking about today is Notre Dame ready for Clemson. And, coming off of the win over a team, they've done really well against ranked teams this season. Gave Ohio State the best game Ohio State has had this year. They, of course, have beaten North Carolina, BYU, and most recently Syracuse. All these ranked teams, Syracuse and BYU, were both ranked 16th when Notre Dame played them. And again, we talked about this a couple of weeks. You sit back and look, and North Carolina's only loss is to Notre Dame. So they're still flying high. And again, Ohio State, the best game anyone has given them, Notre Dame. But they have those eggs that they have laid. And we'll just start. I'll let Vince go first. Jesse can follow up after him, and then chime in wherever we need to be. The Fighting Irish ready for Clemson. So what do you think?
I mean, after the game that they played against
You don't sound very convincing right off the bat.
Well, I will say after the game that they played against Syracuse, I have more faith that they're going to be competitive against Clemson than I did going into the game, to be honest with you. Now, I still have a lot of question marks about what they're going to look like at home. I was very confident in what they were going to do against Clemson because it was on the road. And I know it feels like it's that simple, like home versus on the road. They haven't figured out how to play at home yet. But we saw a lot of signs that a lot of these position groups are ready to go to play against a top flight opponent. I think that they're ready. I'm not saying that they're going to win. I think that they're ready. I think that they're ready to not get embarrassed at this point. And my answer might have been different a couple of weeks ago. But outside of one position group, I think that they are very much ready to compete against Clemson.
Okay. Jess? You might want to unmute yourself. They're sleeping.
Sorry, dog was going crazy there for a little bit. Didn't want to have everyone else hearing that. But Vince brought up a lot of good points. And just kind of building off what he's talking about, I'm gonna, I think, provide some more confidence. I definitely think that Notre Dame is ready. It's just a matter of what products that we're going to get. And that's been the main thing that we've been talking about is the consistent product that Notre Dame puts out there, because they show flashes of being a really elite team and being able to compete with all the best teams in the country. But then the next week we'll go out and play how they did against a horrible Stanford team or a Marshall team, and you're really left to kind of second guess, are they actually ready? I would say that they are ready, and I think that they have the tools to do it. They just need to be consistent. They need to play, to their strengths, and they need to not overly get too cute. Do the things that they know how to do well, and be able to stop Clemson in the run game. I think that's going to be the biggest thing. I'm not too threatened by DJ at quarterback and what he does. And so to me, it's going to come down to a game of who runs the ball better, and who's more prepared to run the ball better, and honestly comes up with more schemes to run the ball better. That's really what it's going to come down to, in my opinion.
Should we have a contest to see who says DJ, the Clemson quarterback's name, the best and the worst? His name?
If you just say DJ, everyone knows who you're talking about. Why would you don't even bring up the what do you know?
You know what?
There's someone I know who Vince knows as well. Jesse might know him a little bit, who essentially gets paid to say people's names for a living. But 2 years ago, when Notre Dame was playing Clemson, he just butchered DJ Uiagalele's name left, right, sideways, any way you could butcher it, and the man would write it out phonetically and still couldn't say it. He would say it different every time. Every time.
It is hilarious.
See, it's easier for you because it's part of your day-to-day job. The phonetics, last names, you write them out on paper beforehand, so you know how to say them. You get a couple practice ones in. I don't need to say his last name. I just need to say DJ, the quarterback from Clemson.
And I think that's pretty much where this guy ended up. He tried, but I'll just say,
yeah,
go ahead.
You're good. No, I need to keep my mouth shut.
I mean, we can shade, but keeping it shade, right?
That's right.
What was my thought? The home and away success. This is still, I started thinking about this because we know that they have played like, I was about to say garbage. They have not played well at home this year, right? I mean, they've lost. How many games have they had? 4 games at home now this season, and they've lost 2 of them, and none of the teams have been ranked. I mean, who's the best of the 4 teams that they have played at home? Like, who would you give that mantle to right now? That was my gut reaction, was Cal, but
I mean,
I don't even know.
Only half the game against Cal. Really, the first half, I wouldn't say that they played all that great.
Right. I guess my point is, and I don't know that there's any way to know this until after we see this game Saturday night, is it about home versus away, or are they playing to the level of the competition? Because the competition away from Notre Dame Stadium has been all the good teams. So are they just getting up for the better teams, and then they're home and they're relaxing, they're letting their, that kind of thing?
Sure.
I'm just thinking out loud with this. I'm not saying that's what it is. I think we're all trying to figure out what that is. Is it a matter of home versus away, or is it just a matter of the better teams have happened to be away? It's more about that than it is being at home.
It's a good question, because I think Marcus Freeman may be asking that very same question, if we're all being honest. I mean, it's like, what are we doing at home? How are we not successful? We prepare the same way. We're doing all the same things. How are we not successful at home? And yet we're pretty darn successful on the road. And I mean, you brought up the stat. They played 4 ranked teams. They beat 3 of them. And really, all 4 of those games have been on the road, right? And I mean, it's Shamrock Series, okay, but it's still on the road. I mean, you can call it a home game all you want. It's still on the road. You're still taking an airplane, staying in a hotel. It's still on the road. You're
not on campus. You have to go. Yes, hours away.
Correct. If it's not inside Notre Dame Stadium, it's on the road. So they've just played so much better on the road than they have at home. But just to devil's advocate myself, I feel like how can you not get up for this game? It's a top 5 team. They're undefeated. I mean, you can call them your biggest ACC rival over the last X amount of years. How can you not get up for this game? So I feel like that's not going to be an issue for, this time around. But, man, I don't know. I just don't know.
For me, I was kind of thinking about this actually right before we kind of went on, and I was really thinking about, the times when I played, and it is sometimes hard, and you fall into ruts of kind of falling down to your competition. I remember when I played travel baseball for a while, we always played bad against crappy teams, and we always played really well against the good teams. And it just became a reoccurring issue. And it's like, well, why don't we just play how we played against the good teams, against these crappy teams, and all of our problems would be solved. And so I think it is a combination of, subconsciously you get into these kind of ruts, no matter how much your coaches talk about, we don't need to overlook this team or that team. We're all people. We see, Stanford's record going into a game. We see that they're struggling. And naturally, I think you just don't bring the same kind of level of concentration and being prepared that you would, because that the opponent isn't as good as, some of these previous opponents that you're playing. And then another thing that I've thought about too is it feels like Tommy Rees gets into these very experimental stages early on in the game, because he knows that opponents aren't necessarily as good. So he has more margin for error. And I think he gets himself into a rut sometimes, because then they fall out of rhythm rather than kind of, building from start to finish and getting into rhythm, and instead of, the experimental and, not finding what's working. And now all of a sudden, next thing you know, it's halftime and you haven't scored any points yet. And that just adds, you feel that pressure on your shoulders. You feel that weight as players that, okay, now we not only do we need to make up for the first half, but we need to, somehow compensate and win the second half now too, and win the game overall. So to me, it's kind of like this cocktail of a lot of things going on, but it just seems like when they go on these road games, they're just so much more, that coaching staff and players are just so much more mentally prepared, and I don't know what that's attributed to. I know Marcus Freeman is, not doing anything different, but it just seems like going into road games, there's just so much more mental sharpness compared to at home, and the execution level is just a lot better. So I don't know what to attribute that to. I think it's a kind of a cocktail of various different things.
Well, it ain't rocket science. Says Tommy just has to quit auditioning for the smartest NFL-style offensive coordinator in the history of college football when game play calling. I mean, that basically, is what you're talking about right there with all this stuff that he's doing, rather than having a staple of things that they can go of things that they now we saw maybe maybe more along those lines of kind of playing to their strengths against Syracuse, but there were times like after they got a pretty good lead on Syracuse, then all of a sudden you see him kind of start tinkering a little bit, and instead of that train roll forward, they put even more points on the board. Instead of keep rolling forward, all of a sudden you get a couple of 3 and outs, and the game starts getting closer, momentum shifts, and all that kind of stuff, and then you need Maris Leofau's interception and a punt block to really help put the game away. That's obviously stuff that they haven't been able to count on all year. But I do think that is a big part of it. I think everyone agrees with that, is the offensive consistency, regardless of who they're playing. And maybe that's right. Maybe he does tend to tinker more against some of those lower teams on the schedule. I think that there's definitely something to that.
If it were me, I would just smash my plays that I know have been working into Clemson right from the start. And if they prove that they can stop our plays that have been successful against everyone else, that's when I kind of go to the drawing board and say, okay, let's try a couple different things here. But I guess I just don't understand why you don't start with what has been dominating other teams, right? And I told you last week when I was on the show and we were kind of talking about things that Notre Dame needed to do against Syracuse. I told you that they needed to be not get uncomfortable with running the ball like 3 straight times if they needed to. And it seems like they got away from that. There was a lot of success running, and instead of just being uncomfortable with the fact that you're just continuously running the ball, well, Syracuse is running 3 down linemen, and they're all undersized. So why not just keep pounding the ball until you literally cannot be stopped? And so that's the thing, is I just feel like they have to be uncomfortable with what's working. You don't have to be this team that does all these different things. You just got to do what's going to win you the game that day. And I think that's been kind of the biggest thing so far.
I agree with what Jess is saying. I think he makes a good point about playing to the competition. And look, as much as we want to say, you've got to be able to get up for every opponent, you're a Division I athlete, et cetera, et cetera.
It's hard.
It's easier said than done. These kids are human. I mean, and they're kids also, right? And so, I mean, there is something to be said for that, and I agree with Jesse. I mean, I see it as a coach. When we play a garbage team, we tend to play like garbage. We play down to their level. We still go out and win the game. We'll play down to their level. You know what I mean? And I've been surprised by how well we had played against teams that we should not even be close to. And so there is something to be said for that, and that's human nature, and that's just the way the game is played, and that's tough. Yeah, it's still fairly inexcusable to lose, obviously, to Marshall and Stanford. There's no question about that. That's inexcusable. You can't do that. You have the players on your roster. Maybe you don't play great, but you at least win those games, right? That is an issue, obviously. But I think they're going to be up for this game. I don't see how they could not be. How can you play a top 5 team and not be up for it?
They're going to be up for it. And it's a night game. The light show's coming out. There's just so many things that will play to the things that the players like. It's what the players like. Do you want the players to be fired up, or do you want to have a mini stroke while watching the light show?
Hey, man, I get it. I was fired up for the light show earlier.
Vince just wants the stadium host to come on late in the game.
I was fired up for the light show earlier.
Host to come on.
Oh, the stadium host. Gosh, now you're going to get me all fired up over here. I think they can do a better job with the light show. That's what I'm saying about the light show. I'm a fan of the light show generally, but they need to do a better job with it, number one. I would say Clemson is a bigger rival right now than Stanford is, and they were trying to shove down our throat that Stanford is a rival of Notre Dame. Clemson's a bigger rival of Notre Dame than Stanford.
Sure. I agree. Well, Stanford, okay, so we're talking about this game then. What are you most confident? I think I think my POS computer my alternate computer that I'm using tonight. I think I'm on a little delay with you guys based on the way things sound. I'm still trying to get the computer booted up. What are you guys most confident in, though, in this matchup?
Jess, why don't you go first?
The thing that I'm most confident in is, Notre Dame's ability to, how do I put this? Notre Dame's ability to effectively run the ball, because we know, or at least I think, and a lot of other people think that, their offense doesn't really go anywhere unless they run the ball. Drew Pine isn't a threat enough. Their wide receivers aren't a threat enough that, that you're going to come out and say that's what's going to beat us. And so I'm most confident that the run game gets going and the rest of the offense opens up, because for me, Drew Pine is what's going to have to win this game for Notre Dame. Pine's performance, whether it is good, that's going to be overall what loses the game. And if it's exceptional and good, I think that's what's going to win the game. But Clemson has a very good run defense. And so you're not going to be able to run the ball and lean on it as much as you've been able to. And so I think that they're going to start early with the run. And if things can open up in the pass because of the run, that's ultimately what's going to take them to the next level, kind of, to win this game. What do you think, Vince?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of the things that you're saying. They're going to have to be able to run the ball against Clemson in order to have a chance at winning this game.
Right.
I mean, you have to be able to run the ball. And I've said this since the second that Drew Pine became the starter at Notre Dame. He can't be successful unless Notre Dame can run the ball, period. He needs a running game. Notre Dame cannot go into this game and put the entire game on the shoulders of Drew Pine. That can't happen, because that's not who Drew Pine is. And that's not who you cannot expect him to be somebody that he's not, right? He's not Trevor Lawrence. He's not a guy that's just going to sit in the pocket and pick you apart, especially with no run game. Because if that was the case, then Clemson would be able to drop 8 and Drew Pine would still be able to pick him apart. That is never going to happen. That is not who Drew Pine is. Now, Drew Pine is somebody that if the running game is effective, right? I'm not saying the run game is going to look like it did against UNLV and like it did against Syracuse, okay, where the offensive line is just pushing Clemson 3 and 4 yards down the field. That's not going to happen. But you need to have a semblance of a run game. Therefore, you can run play action. That way you can roll the pocket out. You can do things that are going to make Drew Pine a successful quarterback in this offense, right? He doesn't have to be Trevor Lawrence. He doesn't have to be Joe Burrow. Name your 5-star prolific quarterback. He doesn't have to be that. He has to be middle of the road Drew Pine. He needs to be 67, 68% passer, not turn the ball over, push the ball down the field when you need to, but he also needs to make those layups, right? He needs to be Drew Pine. If he can be Drew Pine and they have a semblance of a running game, they have a shot. They have a shot against this defense, because the Clemson defense is really good against the run, but I think Notre Dame has a real good run game. They're not real good against the pass. They can be duped when it comes to pass game. Their corners can be taken advantage of. I mean, watch any game that Clemson has played up to this point, and they have looked rough at times against the pass. Again, Drew Pine is not going to pick you apart, but you can do some things where the run game, helps out Drew and then pushes them forward, and then he can take advantage of that, right? But I'm most confident that the run game can do something. And so I'm hoping that is the case, right? So, I mean, we'll see what happens, but the run game has to be an important piece of this offense in order for them to be effective. Absolutely have to be.
Yeah, and I'll go out on a bold limb here and say if Notre Dame runs the ball for 125 and Drew Pine completes 70% of his passes, they will win that game on Saturday. I think that's a pretty confident thing to say, because they give up about 85 a game, Clemson on the ground. Notre Dame can, if they can get over that 100 yard mark, and Pine can do what he needs to do. He's been at like 40 and 50% completion percentage over his last 3 to 4 games. Obviously not great. And Clemson, like you said, Clemson's weakness is their secondary. Vince, I don't know if you remember that week 4 game of Clemson and Wake Forest.
Wake Forest. Oh my gosh, yes. I was going to bring that up. Yes.
Yeah, Wake Forest, threw for 337. They were averaging, kind of 6.6 a game, and it was just a shootout. Now, I don't think that Drew Pine is as good as Wake Forest's quarterback, but he doesn't have to be, because Notre Dame runs the ball then better than what Wake Forest can do. And like you said, you set up so many other things when you can run the ball, because then your players, the linebackers, the safeties, the corners, they're all cheating a step and a half to two. And that's all Drew Pine, that's what Pine needs, is just his wide receivers to get kind of an extra step in man coverage, because they're going to be committing so many more players to the box and stopping the run. So you're going to see a lot of more man coverage, maybe, a single high safety. But really, the run game has to be what controls everything else, because that's how the offense gets going, is only when the run game is going. And if the run game's not going, then Pine is going to be asked to do too much. And I just don't think he's capable of being that quarterback to dig you out of a hole and win you a game. It's just, that's not their formula for winning games.
Yep. Completely agree with that.
It's funny you should mention that, because hello, I'm back.
And you sound great, by the way.
I'm on the other computer. I finally, I can tell. On the computer that we were on, I Googled how to force start a restart on your Mac. So I found out how to force start the restart on the stupid computer I was on. That was, I don't know how choppy I sounded at your end, but it was horrible at this end.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, thanks, PC. So I got it force started, and now I'm back. Hey, everybody.
Welcome back. Appreciate you. But basically, Jess and I both talked about the run game is the thing we're most confident about.
Right. And it looks like the top of my head is cut off here, so I'm going to try to. Oh, we've got a red background too.
I don't know how that happened, but all of a sudden we got red. But whatever.
In the middle of the show, it turned red.
It did. Like, I don't know what happened, but we just.
What else can happen today?
We're just the November special.
Yeah, we're just plowing through.
I guess so. So Marcus Freeman, at his press conference, was asked about Drew Pine, because, I mean, basically you have to ask about Drew Pine all the time now because of what's going on with Drew Pine. So this is just a little bit, this is the tail end of what he was talking, because he talked about Drew Pine has to be better and all these different things. But I thought, to me, the tail end of his quote about Drew Pine was the most interesting part of the quote. So I'll play that for you right now.
Things we gotta, at some point, if we're not running the ball so well, we're gonna throw it more. And so right now we're running the ball pretty well. And if we don't run the ball really well, I think it's going to force us to, obviously take more opportunities in the passing game.
And, now again, it's not that he made a big, bold statement there, but when you look at the strength of Clemson's defense, what's the strength of their defense? Their defensive line, right? To me, it felt like, if I'm reading into this a little bit, Marcus Freeman is saying, without saying, we know it's going to be a little bit tougher running against Clemson, if not a lot tougher running against Clemson. So Drew Pine has got to be able to carry this team a little bit. That's kind of what it sounds like to me. And, Drew Pine 4 games ago showed that, was he going to stare down Michael Mayer? Yeah, but he could still get the job done to some extent. Now, these last 3 games, we've seen a completely different Drew Pine, who's almost a 30% from a completion percentage standpoint, 30% worse quarterback than he was in that good 3-game stretch against Cal, BYU, and North Carolina. So, but it's exactly right. If they're not able to run the ball, and it should be at least tougher to run the ball against Clemson Saturday night. There's going to be more on Drew Pine and the passing game. And that, to me, is kind of it's not a very good prospect to think about, just what we've seen from Drew Pine these last 3 games. What do you guys think?
Completely agree. I mean, that is it. You're not going to be able to, I said this earlier, you can't not rely on Drew Pine to win the game for you, but he's going to have to make plays to keep the offense moving.
Yes.
He's going to have to. And if he doesn't make those plays, then their offense is not going to do well. You can't just run the ball against Clemson. It's not going to look the same as it did against other teams. They have one of the best, run defenses in the country. They have one of the best defensive lines in the country. It's not going to look the same. So Drew Pine's going to have to complete some passes, and he's going to have to complete the layups. That's the biggest difference for me.
Yes.
He's going to have to complete the layups, because even those layups will move the chains.
See, right? And that's the thing, because even the other day, it's you cannot throw the ball into the ground when Lorenzo Styles is set up for a perfect screen pass. There were so many.
Yes.
I won't say so many, but there were easy passes.
Right.
It's not all like now. It's not always, hey, we're forcing the ball to Michael Mayer too much. We're too locked in on Michael Mayer. Now there were times like that pass over the middle where the whole defense basically drops back into zone coverage and he tries to throw it over it, and you end up with that. I mean, you can't have that against Clemson. And again, the running of the football should be much tougher against Clemson. 2 years ago, they came out and Kyron Williams hit that run right away, and it really set the tone for the offense. You can't bank on one of those kind of plays early on, kind of those shock and awe plays to get a defense back on its heels a little bit. That's not really the kind of offense they've shown themselves to be. They've shown themselves to be a bully against really inferior defenses. Clemson should be a lot. I'm not going to call Clemson, like doomsday or like they're the best defense in the
really
world.
Good. They're the best defense maybe arguably between Ohio State and Clemson, but either way, it's still a really good defense. One of the two best defenses you're going to see all season.
Yeah.
I would like to see a more concerted effort attacking kind of the outside run sort of schemes this week. I don't think that there's any advantage to diving right into the heart of the Clemson defensive line. I think you want to set up, get on the perimeter, get your guys like Diggs and Tyree on the edge on some outside kind of zone schemes. I'd like to see some quick screens out to wide receivers that are extension of the run game. Just make Clemson's other players have to make the play, make their corners have to make the play. If they have a good defensive lineman, flick it out to your wide receiver and let them essentially kind of run a run play on the perimeter and let their corners, linebackers, and whoever else is, coming over make the tackle. If they're going to run the ball, which like we just talked about, they have to, I'd like to see more of that, concerted effort to get to the edge rather than just kind of bully it down in the middle there. And while you were also gone, Vince and I talked about, this is a game where Drew Pine has to be at like 70% completion, right? Like Drew Pine
at least 65, I think.
Yeah, great quarter. Like Drew Pine is ultimately going to be what decides win or loss for Notre Dame this week. He just needs to play above average quarterback and can't play below average quarterback. And he needs to hit his short passes. Their offense is built around 3 to 4 yards per time. And if you can get into a 3rd and 2, then you could still, I would trust them to run 2 yards with their offensive line against Clemson. But I don't think you're going to get 4 to 5 on first down like they're accustomed to getting. So you have to find other ways to stay ahead of the chains and get your 4 to 5 yards on first down, because you can't fall behind against the Clemson team, because when you're Drew Pine, you're sitting in 2nd and 10, 3rd and 10. That's not what he's built for, right? Like he's not built to pick up those big plays, to be the guy, the quarterback that's going to get you out of these holes. He's just a complimentary quarterback, and that's fine. That's not a bad thing. It's just how their offense is built, but they just need to know that and know that, that's the biggest frustration, I think, is Tommy Rees thinks that his offense is more than what it is sometimes, rather than it is what it is, right? Like we're 8 games into the season now. You're going against number 5 Clemson. You need to know what you're good at and just continuously do it.
That's spot on, man. Like you said it right at the very end was the best part of what you said. And I agree with all the scheme and things that they should be doing, but the end is what you said. You can do a lot of things scheme-wise for Drew Pine to be successful when you're talking about, 2nd and mediums, 3rd and shorts. You don't have to run the ball on all of those, but there's certain things you can do with Drew Pine where he's throwing the ball where it's a layup versus standing in the pocket and trying to, dissect drop 8. Right. There's a ton of things you can do with Drew Pine, and that's okay. He can do those things. You can scheme guys open when you're talking about some shorter distances and some, the pressure not being all on him to make a play. There's things you can do. I trust Tommy Rees to be able to do those things as long as he understands that's who this offense is. You can be very successful with this offense if you're smart about it.
I assume that Jesse will be bringing his whiteboard on Thursday for Thursday's show.
I haven't. I need to get into those.
After the Stanford loss, we blew up a lot of things. There was not a lot of excitement going on around here.
That's right. People were crying in the chat over the whiteboard that in the spreadsheets that Jesse brought in.
Hey, truth hurts.
Yeah.
The numbers never lie, Vince.
That's right.
The numbers never lie.
You're right. There's going to be a lot more on Drew Pine. And when, just look at Saturday against Syracuse. And it's not just Syracuse. It's become a little bit more of a trend. And we saw this, I think, earlier in Ian Book's career as well. When teams decide, Syracuse is built on a 3-man front to begin with. So they typically are going to drop a lot of guys. But when Drew Pine has faced a 3-man rush and they're dropping 8 into coverage, he's really confused a lot of times, I think, and that is a big issue for him. But you can solve some of that with a lot of the things that you guys are talking about, some simplifications. Like if they're going to drop 8, well, okay, they're dropping 8, then that means you're going to have room to make plays on the perimeters. They're going to be screen passes and those things that you guys are talking about. They're going to be there. Some easy little layups to get him going, because I really think that that's all it's about for him, is just getting early confidence and getting into a little bit of a flow can really get him kickstarted. It's like, quarterbacks, you don't want to be overly emotional, but he is a pretty emotional guy. We have seen that. And if he's going to be emotional, he's got to feed on the good emotion. He's got to get that going early. He can't get down early. They need to find a way to get that in his brain and get him rolling in the right direction. So for me, and I know you guys have probably covered a lot. We've covered most of this right now, but I'm pretty confident in what the defense can do against Clemson myself. Like, I don't think that this is a game where, it's like, ooh, Clemson is coming, even compared to 2020 with some of the receivers that they had out there. And obviously before back to 2018 as well, Uiagalelei has obviously struggled, and they've used they've used Klubnik. So you've got a veteran former 5-star guy who has had some success and was really good early on, but he got benched a couple weeks ago against Syracuse. If Syracuse can make them look like, now they ran the ball really well, but they turned the ball over some, and that's the thing that Syracuse does well, is turn the ball over. But if Syracuse can make Clemson struggle, there's no reason to believe that Notre Dame's defense can't make Clemson struggle as well Saturday.
I would say that that's one of the things that, if we're talking about offensively, what we're excited about, obviously it's the run game, but defensively, there's absolutely no reason that this defense can't make life very difficult for Clemson. If they have a similar game plan to what they did in the first half of the game against Syracuse, if they can do that and they don't just put it into, neutral in the second half, if they do that the whole game, I don't care who the quarterback is for Clemson. I don't care that they've got, Shipley in the backfield and all of these different things. They're going to make life very, very difficult for Clemson. And I feel very good about what that looks like for Notre Dame. Now, of course, you need the offense to back you up. But if we're just talking about the matchup of Notre Dame's defense versus Clemson's offense, it is not even anywhere near as daunting as it was in 2020. I think this defense can make Clemson's offense just really struggle at times, for sure.
I think so too. Just got to avoid those big plays. That's
Absolutely
still the big thing. And it's just like, I just don't get some of the times they decide, it's like, okay, let's go zero coverage now. I don't like the times they pick to do that. I don't get, and I hope that they don't do very much of that against Clemson, because they just really, you have to avoid big plays against these guys, because again, their offense has been good, but there's just enough inconsistency that I think if you avoid those, you can be in this game going into the fourth quarter.
I would say arguably this is the least dynamic team of Clemson that Notre Dame has faced since playing Clemson. You're looking at a Trevor Lawrence-less team. The wide receivers are obviously not as good as they used to be. Obviously, DJ has had his struggles. If you take away their run game and you make DJ pass it, we know he's not an elite passer, and that's got to be their game plan, is just shutting down the run. I like what they did against North Carolina and Syracuse, similar game plans defensively. You bring that in to Clemson. And obviously you have to be prepared for what's given them fits and quarterback runs. You got to have someone who's committed to the quarterback. DJ is good with his feet. I remember watching him in designed runs against Syracuse in their game that they played each other. So you just got to be prepared for those things. If they have the same game plan that they did against North Carolina, Syracuse, and bring that into, to Clemson, I think a lot of things will go well. They just need to get off the field on 3rd and long. They can't let Clemson extend drives. That's their biggest weakness, is 3rd and long. To me, everyone talks about this big old red zone deficiency for Notre Dame's defense, and I'm just not buying it. I think Notre Dame is a very solid defense, and I'll tell you why the red zone things don't matter to me, because last week, I can't remember the exact numbers here, but I remember what the number came down to. It doesn't matter if teams are scoring in the red zone at a high rate if they're not getting there often. Meaning, if they're getting there like 100 times and they're scoring in the red zone all 100 times, sure, yeah, that's an issue. But if you're only in the red zone 15 times and you've given up 15 red zone touchdowns over 8 games, that's not a bad average. They're not getting to the red zone often. It's just when they are getting to the red zone that they're scoring a lot. And so, yeah, teams
they're also scoring touchdowns a lot. I think that's the bigger issue. It's not just that they're scoring; it's that they're scoring touchdowns. But I understand the point of what you're saying. You're saying the percentages say that teams aren't necessarily getting to the red zone very often, but when they do get to the red zone,
they're scoring.
They're punching it in. Yeah, but games can be a lot closer. Like, I guess I'm more concerned about 95-yard drives in the fourth quarter that turn into a red zone score.
Right. Yeah, obviously those are the issue is the late long drives when Notre Dame's looking to put teams away, and the 3rd and long situations where teams extend drives on 3rd and long when they just need to be getting off the field. And so I'm most confident in Notre Dame's defense is going to be their secondary. I think they're going to give DJ fits. I think they're going to come up with at least 1 interception or turnover, and they're going to need turnovers because any sort of, extra possessions, points off or turnovers in a game like this is something that could, come up crucial. And again, we talked about this last week. They have to be better in the 3rd phase. Their special teams has been outstanding this year, way better than last year. And that's a huge underrated phase when you're, blocking punts, you're getting positive yards on getting the ball to the 35 instead of the 25. That's huge for your offense. Getting 5 to 10 yards on punt return, that's huge for your offense. And so if they can continue to, beat Clemson in the special teams phase, I think that's another big factor because, we talked about last week, that's a third of the game. You have offense, defense, and special teams. And I think if, they continue to do things well on special teams, they continue to take away, DJ's, throwing and the secondary, and they do what they need to do on offense, it really shouldn't be too hard of a game. I like Notre Dame actually in this game for that reason, because I think that they do things better in more phases. It's just a matter of consistency, and that's just the season-long message.
So what you're saying, going back to what we were talking about earlier, is you think it's more about playing up or down to the level of competition than it is home or away.
Yeah, I don't see it as a home or away issue. I just see it as unfortunately, knowing who your competition is and coming off big games. It seems like they go big game, small game, big game, small game, big game, small game, like Ohio State, Marshall, big BYU, BYU game come into Stanford, and then it's just there's no more time for the fall offs. Like, this is the end of the season. This is where you should be playing your best, and you got to really finish strong. And that's what I'm looking forward to most in this game. Even if they lose, if they play a competitive game where I feel like they didn't beat themselves, I'll be happy with that. I just don't like losing where I feel like they didn't put their best foot forward and they continue to kind of shoot themselves in the foot.
Vince?
You know what? Like I said earlier, there's a lot of truth to what Jess is saying. And when you talk about a home schedule, a lot of those games are going to be stinkers. I mean, that's just how it is in high Division I college football, right? Your home slate usually has 1 or 2 really good games, and the rest of them are stinkers.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest, right? And they're not getting up for the stinkers right now, and that's a problem. I mean, it's a legit problem. It just so happens that those games are the ones that are at home.
And the ones that you got to win. Those are like the ones that you usually pad your win column with,
Absolutely.
right?
Those exactly. I mean, they're literally pay-for-play games. You're literally paying the team to come in so that they can take their butt whooping and then leave, right? And one of them beat your butt. I mean, that's not a good thing. That's not good.
So someone was asked if Uiagalelei is going to start Saturday. He is at least listed at number 1 on their depth chart.
I just looked at it. Yeah.
For whatever that means. You know, like I would think that, well, one, it depends on how much confidence they have in Klubnik. I mean, they had a bye after the Syracuse game. Klubnik came in and played quite a bit in the second half after they ended up benching DJ. But, you know, he has played here before when Trevor Lawrence was hurt a couple of years ago. He's got that experience playing here, even though it was a mostly empty stadium. But he is your veteran who is a junior now at this point. So I would think that even this is just like how I would kind of rationalize it. Even if we end up seeing both, it probably makes more sense that you go with your veteran to start things off and see how the game plays out after that.
Could not agree more. I think that's exactly what I would do. Dabo Swinney is no idiot. I mean, he's not going to – I mean, you could run out there with a true freshman who played fairly well down the stretch of the Syracuse game. Obviously, they got the win, so that's really important. You've had a bye week to potentially get him ready. I did look at the depth chart just like you. DJ Uiagalelei is listed as the starter. And and I expect him to start. I mean, he does have the experience in Notre Dame Stadium, like you said. I'm not ready to go away from him just yet. If I'm Dabo Swinney, I mean, he has won a lot of games for you. They are undefeated, you know, and I think that he will get the start. But if he struggles and Notre Dame is in his face, which I fully anticipate that they will be, I would not in any way be surprised if they brought in the other kid, Klubnik.
This, you know, what's interesting is DJ kind of has what I'm calling the Joe Burrow syndrome right now. He had better talent back when they played that game 2 years ago. And I think that game was so close because his deficiencies were made up for by his talent around him. Well, that's not going to be the case this year. I think he is going to look worse. Clemson is not going to put up the same amount of points offensively. And it's because of that. It's, you know, we talked about it before. Is it the wide receivers that make, you know, the quarterback, or is it the quarterback that make the wide receivers? You want to find the balance where it's 50-50. But I just think so much right now, and what DJ did 2 years ago compared to now, I just think that he had so much more talent, and that's really what's hurting him, is he just doesn't have the talent to kind of make up for the deficiencies. And Vince, I have a quick question for you that I've posed before. What does a Clemson win erase for you? Does it erase Marshall? Does it erase Stanford? Does it erase both of them? What does a win against Clemson erase?
Hold it. Let's just do this. First. Hold that thought.
Oh, boy.
Let me ask both of you. Are you ready for rapid fire?
Yes. Oh, he's got the gun. He's got the bringing him out of the holster.
So let's start rapid fire with that then. Vince.
Oh.
Jesse, ask him the question once again.
My question for you is, what a Notre Dame win against Clemson erases what from your memory? Marshall, Stanford, or both? Or neither? Honestly, neither is an option. But what does a Clemson win to kind of negate for you? What does it offset for you?
The only thing it negates is the fact that I had to watch the last Notre Dame victory at my house. This one, it does not negate either one, to be honest with you.
Okay, so you can't get over those even with a win against Clemson.
I can't, because I thought that Notre Dame would have a good shot against Clemson going into the season, right? It wasn't like a cloud in the sky, pie in the sky situation that they were going to beat Clemson, right? And it is very difficult for me to, you know what? Here's a better analogy for me. If they would have beaten Clemson, then it would have erased like the Ohio State loss. Like those two things are similar to me.
Right.
I can't erase those two terrible losses against Marshall and Stanford.
Because now, to me, to that point, if they beat Clemson after playing so well against Ohio State, but they've lost those two stinkers, all that does is make you go, you just kick yourself, because now it's like you would be in college football playoff contention.
Absolutely.
Had you won those games. You know, and even if you lost one of those two games, you're probably still going to creep into New Year's Six conversation at the very worst at some point, if you would at least split those games. So I agree. I don't think it can wipe out either one of them. It just makes you that much more probably frustrated at the fact that they lost those 2 games. What do you?
So I see the frustration part, but for me going into the season, I thought Stanford was a definite win and Clemson was like a toss-up, and I was okay with one of those, Clemson, USC being a loss. And so if they beat Clemson, I'm okay with swapping those out because I was essentially going to be okay if they lost to Clemson already, / chalking up to a team that I thought that they would probably lose to, right? So it's like, I'm okay with swapping them out. I guess I was just seeing if anyone else had the same
right
ideology.
If they lose to Clemson and then they lose to USC, I
that's
bury my head in the sand someplace.
I do think we'll finally see them ranked though if they can beat Clemson. I think they'll get back onto the rankings if they.
Okay,
if they
let's just reel in. There are other days in this week. There are other rapid fire topics. That have to be used at different points. Okay, we can't shoot them all in one night. All right.
So what happens when you bring on 2 people at one time?
That's right. We can't just Bobby this up and flip flop from one topic to another. Okay. You guys are here for a reason. All right. So we've had a couple Chase Claypool questions, and I texted you guys a little bit before the show. This wasn't on the original list, but with Chase Claypool getting traded to the Bears from the Steelers today for a 2nd-round pick, Shane Wasson, Tyler Evans says Vince is going to need a Chase Claypool jersey. Jess, I'll let you start with this. What do you think about this trade?
I think it's a brilliant move for the Steelers. They get a 2nd-round pick. Claypool is coming up to, I think, year 4 or 5. So that rookie deal is almost
He's in his
over.
3rd year right now. Yeah.
Right. And so year 4 is usually when you see things get restructured. You start seeing some sort of, increase in salary. And so for me to get him off your books and to get a 2nd-round trade pick and then obviously for the Bears, I think they gave up a little too much with the 2nd-round pick, but you got Fields, another person to throw it to. And that's what they've been, he's been crying for, asking for. I know he obviously probably wants some offensive line help too, but he needs more weapons. You texted me about that after the Bears and Cowboys game because I said that the Bears offense looked pretty good. And then you said, well, if they get a few more weapons, they could probably be even better.
Oh,
so
look at you two.
We were actually saying good things about the Bears, Vince.
When you add a stocky, rangy, fast wide receiver who can go up and get the ball, I think both sides ultimately won the trade. I think the Steelers won it just a little bit more because they got a 2nd-round pick and they didn't have to worry about redoing someone's salary as well. So with the guy that you might not potentially bring back in the end, and then to get a second for in return, I thought it was a great deal for the Steelers. But both sides won, in my opinion.
Yeah, they may have given up a little bit too much in that 2nd-round pick, but I think that based on the weapons that the Bears have right now, Chase Claypool is a better wide receiver now than he was when he was in college. And I don't think anybody's going to argue with me on that. And he's pretty darn good when he was in college. So I will say that, he has the opportunity to be a number 1, in Chicago. At the very least, a number 2. But right now, he's a number 1. And that's fine. You can be a number 1, and I think that equals a 2nd-round pick. I'm okay with that, to be honest with you, especially with the lack of wide receiver talent that the Bears have had for the last 2 decades, if I'm being honest.
They got a wide receiver, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, and
I'd say that's the last one.
A lone wolf, man.
And Claypool is like Brandon Marshall, tall,
agreed,
fast, lanky, going to get the ball.
And this only helps Cole Kmet, as people were saying. I mean,
Mooney will open up more.
We've already, we've already started to see some, just like Vince or just like Jesse was just talking about it in that Cowboys game the other day. Justin Fields is actually starting to show some stuff. They're letting him run more and actually play to his talents, and it's helping that offense out. But the thing that he doesn't have is a wide receiver. So, like when I look at this, I said, man, that 2nd-round pick, I don't know, because like what Jesse said, you got another year with him, and then you with the contract and all that stuff. But they did just get back a 2nd-round pick because they traded Smith and Robert Quinn as well in the last week. So they've traded away some defense. And like when they started doing that, I'm like, man, what are you doing? But then it's like, okay, these are veteran guys.
Right.
They're obviously in a rebuild. The offense is what they have to address the most. To get Justin Fields, a talent like Chase Claypool, and then as Jonathan said, they gave up the 2nd-rounder to outbid the Packers because they needed a wide receiver desperately as well. So now if Chase Claypool works out these next couple of years, you can either franchise him or you sign him to a long-term deal, or whatever you need to do, so you can keep him around for a little bit if that's what you decide. They had to build that offense if they were ever going to do anything. And when you take Justin Fields as high as you did, you've got to put something around him. So I really like this deal for him. Again, like the second rounder sounded like a lot at first, but when you sit back, I think
especially if
they need to do something, and now you get an actual veteran receiver to put with him.
If this is accurate, and you know me, I'm as petty as they come. If this comment is accurate by Jonathan, says the Bears traded their second rounder to outbid the Packers,
that was enough.
I'm okay with it, baby. I'm okay with it.
You don't want Aaron Rodgers to make one last run?
I do not. I didn't want him to make the first one, so I'm good.
I thought it was overall an exciting NFL deadline. I saw something that was the most trades at the NFL deadline. There were 10 today. Miami turned Trey Lance because the 49ers traded up for Trey Lance. They flipped that into Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and Bradley Chubb. I thought that was pretty incredible what they did with the with what they got for Trey Lance and then what they were able to turn it into. I thought that was like the master class on how to, flip picks and get what you need and all that stuff. So it was a really exciting day for NFL trade deadline. And I enjoyed it. It was cool seeing kind of, usually you only see it around like the NBA or the MLB, but it felt like there was more of that kind of like blockbuster kind of going on today with the NFL, which was fun. Yeah.
NFL trade deadline used to be kind of just but definitely this is one of the bigger ones ever, I think.
Absolutely.
So. All right, first college football playoff rankings come out tonight. Do you buy or sell Notre Dame showing up in the top 25, Vince?
Huge sell. I don't think they deserve to be in the top 25, nor do I think they will be in the top 25. And that's fine because they haven't deserved it. Anybody that loses to Stanford and Marshall doesn't belong in the top 25 right now because they don't have an impressive enough win to be like, okay, well, they lost here, but they won these. It's not there yet. Yes, they've beaten 3 ranked teams that will probably be ranked in the college football playoff top 25 tonight, I would imagine. And that's great. That's a start. That is not the finish. That is not where you've got to get a marquee win. And you've got 2 more opportunities to do that if, they're not there yet.
Yeah, I'm selling that. They're not there yet as well. I don't care for these rankings at all. I'm all in it for the rankings that come out at the very end, and that's what I'm most looking forward to in Notre Dame because I think they have a very solid chance to finish strong here and get themselves into a top 15 ranking by the end of the year if they can beat Clemson, USC, Navy, and Boston College. I think those 2 wins against very high ranked Clemson and USC potentially will put them in that top 15 by the end of the year, but they're just not there right now. And I'm okay with that. Like I said, I don't care where we're at right now. I care where we're at the very end of the season when all the data points are up there and the whole resume is on display.
Yeah. As Stymie said, Driscoll made a strong case for a 25 ranking just to benefit Ohio State and Clemson. And Brian and I have talked about that. The College Football Playoff Committee, because of the fact that it's not people from all over the country sending in votes, they're actually people sitting in the same room and it's a smaller group. They tend to like to justify who they rank high by back-ending the top 25.
Yeah, they set it up
with teams like this. That's right. It's like, well, look, they've got to win over this ranked team. So I am mostly sell. Like if we're talking about are they deserving of it, I'm definitely sell right now unless they beat Clemson Saturday night. But where we are right now on Tuesday, I would not be completely shocked if it happens. Maybe they're not top 25 now, but maybe they're sitting there 26, 27 even, kind of knocking on the door of that. But I would not be shocked if they show up in that 24, 25 range just because of, again, they've got a history of back-ending the top 25 to justify whoever they put in those top 4. So do you think Notre Dame will ever be ranked if they don't win this week?
Go ahead,
I think
Jess.
4 losses is tough. I think an 8-4 team at the end of the season with 2 Stanford and Marshall losses, that would be tough. But you would have 4 ranked wins because that would assume you beat USC. And so it's that balance that we were kind of talking about. Do they see the 4 ranked wins enough to kind of offset the 2 ugly losses? And then obviously the loss to Ohio State, who is more than likely going to finish in the top 5 by the end of the season. So, yeah, I think it definitely 5 losses will not get you in the rankings. 4 is pushing it. I think 3 definitely gets you there, but 4 is like right on that brink. I think that they could potentially end up there. Maybe it just depends on what the Clemson game is. Is it a close game? Is it a blowout? I think that kind of factors into it. But to me, with so many SEC teams and teams that are in conferences, this is where it hurts you in not being in a conference, because an 8-4 SEC is a lot, gets a lot more respect than what Notre Dame would at 8-4 with Stanford and Marshall losses. So again, I think there will be more deserving teams with an 8-4 record, 9-3 record that would deserve it over Notre Dame.
I completely agree. I don't think that Notre Dame is going to get a lot of love because their losses are just bad losses.
Yeah.
I mean, they're really bad. Those 2 losses are really, really bad. And, you can say, well, they also lost to whatever. No, I'm sorry. Lost to Ohio State and a loss to Clemson. You can write those off. You can't write off those other 2.
Right.
And so if they lose to Clemson, I don't think that they will get into the top 25, even if they beat USC. It'll be just an upset by an unranked team at that point, and it'll be the last game of the season. And so, you're not going to have an opportunity to do much else after that. And so if they lose to Clemson and then win out, I still don't think that they belong in the rankings. I just don't see a 4-loss team in the rankings. I just don't.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hard to say. Okay, so Syracuse running back Sean Tucker had an interesting tweet after losing to Notre Dame Saturday. Here's what he said, quote, "Saturday we lost. Syracuse 24, Notre Dame 41. I'm not pleased with the outcome of the game. It just wasn't our day. I'm not pleased with my performance, so I'm grinding harder this week on and off the field. I rushed for 60 yards and touchdown, 4 receptions for 32 yards. Hashtag, I guess this is supposed to say pleased, PL34SED.
You got to get your number in there, baby. It's all about product placement.
That's right.
It's sorry, go ahead.
I've got some thoughts on this. I'm curious, am I reading too much into it? And I'll give mine I can give mine either first or last. I don't know like what you guys thought of this. So if you guys have something to say, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll start us off on this one. I'm a big proponent of season starts. It's a grind. Every week's not, some weeks are good, some weeks are bad. Just stay off the phone. There's no reason to tweet about, performances. Everyone sees your stats. Like everyone, I just don't think that there's any benefit of tweeting out something like that. It's only going to be used against you. And I thought that the funniest thing that came of it is Brandon Joseph posting a picture of him tackling Tucker, putting the same hashtag pleased in there. That you're only inviting that kind of stuff.
I missed that.
You're only inviting that kind of stuff when you do that. And so to me, it's just like Joe Burrow puts down the phone during the season. He's struggling. Things aren't going as well. There's no benefit, in my opinion, of being on the phone, tweeting stuff like that. In season, you're at practice or doing something football related like 90% of the time. You're around the same people like 90% of the time. So just stay away from it. Nothing good comes from it. It's just ammunition for other people, in my opinion.
And it's not a good look. I'm sorry. It's not a team look, and I'm big on team, and he is putting himself out there as an individual, and that bothers me. And maybe that makes me sound old school. I don't know. But I don't like it. It doesn't sound like he's team first. It sounds like he's 34 first with his hashtag and everything else. Like, okay, we lost. I'm not pleased with it, but I'm going to keep grinding. It's just, yeah, you know what? You're the best player on that team or one of them, right? That's great. But you don't need to put it out there in the Twitterverse and talk about it. I'm sorry. I'm not a fan of that in any way, shape, or form. It sounded way too much me, and not enough team.
Nice. I like it. I love it. There's the Brandon Joseph tweet. To me, and I agree with what you guys are saying, like, I could have lived with about half of this tweet. Like, I'm not pleased with my performance, so I'm grinding harder this week. Okay, stop right there. But, like, I rushed for 60 yards and touchdown, 4 receptions for 32 yards. This is like a high school kid with a humble brag on Twitter. It's like, we lost, but here are my stats. Like, what the hell are you doing?
Right.
What does that have to do with anything? Just like if he said, I'm not pleased with my performance. We're grinding harder this week instead of, whatever. Stop. The stats had no place in there. It just makes him look foolish and pretty immature, I think. And like you guys said, self-centered. That's the biggest takeaway I had from the whole thing. So I think we're all on the same page.
Well, and I'm going to pull this up too. Thomas says y'all are overreacting. This is how NIL works. He's marketing himself. If I'm in charge of the NIL dollars and I'm trying to find an athlete, I'm not having him because I don't like the way he puts himself in front of everybody else after a crappy performance. Sorry.
And I mean, if he was going to get NIL, he'd be getting NIL. Like he's not going to get it for tweeting that he rushed for 60 yards and a touchdown.
Sorry. So, hard pass.
Yeah. I guess if he wants to have his hashtag out there, whatever.
Stupid.
It sounds like some of these rankings are being thrown out right now.
Yeah, the rankings are coming out. Vince and Brian are doing a full ranking show at 8:00. So we'll kind of leave that in the rear view mirror.
Double duty Vince tonight.
Keep it going and try to get a couple questions in here before we wrap up this show. But again, Brian and Vince have the full, and maybe some other guys from the crew as well, have the full college football playoff ranking show tonight. So in the wake of the Michigan State-Michigan brawl over the weekend, some have suggested they need to take a break in playing the rivalry. Do you guys buy or sell that?
Hard sell. Hard sell. Just because a couple guys couldn't control themselves in the tunnel doesn't mean you stop playing the game. I'm sorry. That's terrible. Well, it's terrible what happened. I get it. You
might remember Notre Dame and Miami used to play quite a bit.
But they're not do we consider Miami a rival?
Back then. They were rivals back then. They were big-time rivals back then.
5-year period, they were a rival.
Well, because they were playing all the time. And it was like, I get what you're saying.
I said that Notre Dame and Clemson are rivals right now, more so than Notre Dame and Stanford. So I'm kind of going against what I said because I think Clemson and Notre Dame are rivals right now. They are not traditional rivals.
Right. But, like, there was no other reason to end the rivalry with Miami other than stuff like this happening, because it got too bitter and they decided that it wasn't worth continuing.
I just feel like the rivalry between Michigan and Michigan State runs deeper than any rivalry that Notre Dame ever had with Miami.
Gotcha.
So I would say because of that, no, you don't cancel the rivalry. That's
Lou Holtz might tell you different.
Yeah,
though.
He might. He might.
Yeah, this might be my biggest sell of all time. It's Michigan and Michigan State. It's one of the biggest rivalries. I've lived in Michigan. They hate each other's guts. The fans hate each other's guts. It's the best time of the year. I like being devil's advocate, standing in the middle and saying, you guys suck, and making fun of both of them at the same time.
Nice.
But, I think that there's more to this than just, it's not a function of the rivalry. I mean, it is a function of the rivalry. They obviously don't like each other, but there just there needed to be more kind of things in the tunnel personnel wise to for these situations that arise. And I've heard that this is an issue that has come up before, a lack of personnel in the tunnel to kind of officiate, who should be in there, who shouldn't be in there, getting between, people when this kind of situations happen. And so I think it's a 50-50. I think obviously players know not to act like that, but there also needs to be people in place for when stuff like this does happen, so it doesn't escalate to the level that it got to.
Right, and there's a reason Notre Dame built a second tunnel. They built the visitors tunnel because Notre Dame's tunnel is not that big. Now it's bigger than that Michigan tunnel. I think
the Michigan tunnel's super long.
It is very long, and it's pretty narrow, and apparently it's been there. Basically that's the one tunnel that they've had. So you could solve some of this by having another tunnel. Now, a lot of schools only have one tunnel. Notre Dame for a long time only had one tunnel. They finally built the second tunnel. It was narrow, so Purdue could complain that they didn't get their drum through that, small little tunnel. But you've got a separate tunnel. I think that would help some of this. Michigan athletics makes a lot of money. Just build another tunnel. Either that or have a better system for how these guys get through there, You
and I went to a lot of Notre Dame games.
The rivalry.
Sean, you and I went to a lot of Notre Dame games, right? The referees would stop one team until the whole team was through,
right?
And then that team got to go, right? I don't understand why, number one, why that didn't happen. And number two, I'm not condoning the actions of the Michigan State players. Can I just put an asterisk next to that? But why are one or two random Michigan guys trying to go up the tunnel at the exact same time as the Michigan State players? Dude, safety in numbers, man. Stay back with your team. There's no reason for you to be there right then. But again, that doesn't condone the actions. It's just, why are you trying to sneak up early, man?
I agree. And, it's just, I think they talked about it a little bit last night, but it's just nuts. Like when you see some of the video and
it is.
and
I
hear
agree.
what happened, that it's, like,
and too many people standing around not stopping it too. I have a big problem.
Well,
with that.
Right. That's.
I did. There was an older usher type guy who was like the closest to it, and I did see him kind of try to get in there. But what are you going to do?
Well, there were,
when you're an older usher and you've got 5 Michigan
mob
State
of people.
Yeah, it's
and there were other, like there was another video I saw where there were people who I can't remember which team they belonged to, but they were literally running the other direction. Like, really, you're there for a reason, and running the other direction is not it.
Right.
But,
Exactly.
Anyway, off soapbox.
Which was more shocking Sunday? The Dallas Cowboys wearing their blue jerseys at home, or Bears quarterback Justin Fields jumping over Cowboys linebacker Micah Parsons rather than touching him down? All he had to do was touch him before Parsons recovered he had already recovered the fumble before he returned it for a touchdown.
Jess is going to have a much better reasoning for this than I'm going to have because it was very apparent very early on that the Bears were not going to be contending in this game. So I stopped watching it pretty early on. Plus I had to coach little girl basketball, but I was more surprised because I did see the beginning of the game that the Cowboys were wearing their blues at home. That was weird to me. I didn't understand it. I was going to ask you about it since you guys are the resident Cowboy fans as to why in the world that was happening. But that was more surprising to me because I didn't see the other one.
I think what was more surprising was Justin Fields not touching down Parsons, because Cowboys just they seem to just kind of do whatever they want sometimes, and especially when it comes. I think they didn't want to be upstaged by the Bears wearing all that orange at home, and so they had to bring out their kind of color uniforms as well. That's at least where I'm seeing it. But for me, Fields not touching down Parsons was just incredible. Because
like, what are you doing?
It's like it's an obvious turnover. None of your other players are around, and all you have to do, and I get it, he's trying to just get out of the play and avoid injury. But if you touch him with one hand while he's down, that's like the easiest act in football that there might be. Staying out of harm's way. So I just couldn't believe it. Obviously, he wasn't trying to, and he probably thought that someone else touched him, or there had to be reasoning for it, right? He didn't deliberately just jump over him, and Parsons gets up and runs it back for a touchdown. But that was more surprising to me because I think he has more football common sense than that, and so that was just really surprising for me. And the jersey thing, the Cowboys are just so spontaneous sometimes. They just seem to kind of just do what they want sometimes.
Jerry's in money-making mode. Yeah, it came out of the blue with I turned on the TV and it's like, oh, I didn't know they were wearing blue jerseys today. And then you've got Dallas wearing blue and the Bears wearing all this orange, the orange helmets they brought back.
I don't mind those. I don't know why everyone hates those orange helmets. They're not.
I don't mind the orange helmet. I think if it's with a blue jersey or even a white jersey, but orange and orange is a bit much.
They need to be white on white on white. Bring it. Let's go. White.
The real craziness on that play is I saw a picture tweeted where Justin or Micah Parsons, I think, is getting double teamed just to the left of Justin Fields, and there are 3 more offensive linemen up in front of him. So there's only one guy in blue in this picture as Fields is throwing that pass. And the caption on the tweet was, Micah Parsons scored a touchdown on this play because he chases down the play after getting away from this double team, recovers the fumble, then he's down on the ground, then Fields does the leapfrog over him, and Parsons returns it for it. Because I remember when Parsons was getting up, and I'm like, no way. He was touched down. Somebody touched him. And then they show that replay, and literally, if Fields' cleat had just grazed Micah Parsons' back on that play.
Taking away from being a Cowboys fan, watching Micah Parsons is my favorite thing to do in football right now. Being a defensive player and just seeing, last week he got beat on a play against the Lions. He gets up to 21 miles per hour and tackles the Lions guy at the half-yard line. The next play, the Lions fumble, and the Cowboys get the ball back. And that's all set up by a hustle play, by him just chasing down the play. And again, this week, he chases down a play, picks up a loose ball, and runs it back. he's always got that motor. It's crazy to see someone never take a break, knowing how good he is, and it's just refreshing to watch.
I tell you what, JD Bertrand has been criticized for just reasons this year, but if you watch JD Bertrand, he doesn't have the speed and athleticism of Micah Parsons, but he's made those kind of plays as well, where he's gotten beat in the backfield and then he's running down guys 30, 40 yards downfield. Now, part of the reason he's got to is because he got beat in the backfield, but he's not giving up on the play. So I will at least, I will give him that. You see a lot of that same kind of effort. He just doesn't kind of have that high-end speed that Micah Parsons has.
It's the mentality, and that's obviously coached, and that's a good thing that you want to see as a defensive fan is your coach is teaching you to just constantly rally to the ball, because you never know what's going to happen. You never know when something like that's going to pop out.
Yeah.
You run drills like that all the time for just being ready for anything like that.
Well, I should have known that the three of us would go and go and go.
You knew that was going to happen.
But that's right.
When you told me we were going to stay between 6 and 7, I was like, yeah, it's never going to happen. No chance.
We finished the first segment a little bit before.
I guess we did.
So we're going to give Vince a little break. So
I'm over here taking notes on the ranking. So
yeah, because you're getting all the college football playoff ranking numbers coming in.
Yep.
All right, great stuff tonight, guys. It was a lot of fun. It's the first time we've ever had the three of us together. So
it needs to happen again, and I think it will.
I think so. So we've got the mailbag show tomorrow. Of course, Jess will be back with his whiteboard on Thursday, and then coming up here in just a little bit for the Livesters is Vince and Brian and whoever else happens.
I think it's just the two of us.
Just the two of you guys now. Okay.
I think it's just the two of us. So
all right.
In about 34 minutes, make sure you lock in. There'll be a new room, a new link. So if you're going to be here for both, make sure you come on over, because I've got some notes already written down over here about some of these rankings. It's very confusing to me, some of these. So it's going to be fun.
All right. That's going to do it for tonight. Appreciate it, guys. We will talk to you mañana. IB Nation Sports Talk.